It was supposed to be a routine mission, one of those assignments that barely made a ripple on the interstellar radar, a diplomatic escort to the newly discovered Vrander system. I was chosen not because I was special, but because I had proven to be a reliable and unflinching security officer. My name is Ethan Voss, and until that day, I had never faced an enemy I couldn't conquer or a challenge I couldn't overcome. That was before I met the Vrandans. The Vrander system's main planet, Vrandar Prime, shimmered like a polished emerald set against the velvet blackness of space. From the window of the Titan-class cruiser Resolute, I gazed at its vast, rolling jungles that seemed to breathe under a soft, bluish mist. Reports had said the Vrandans were a species both exotic and formidable, renowned for their physical prowess and intelligence. But nothing could have prepared me for what awaited. "Lieutenant Voss, we're about to dock," crackled the voice of Commander Hale through my earpiece, breaking my trance. I adjusted my tactical vest, feeling the familiar weight of my pulse rifle pressing against my shoulder. It wasn't just a tool, it was an extension of myself. The air on the bridge was taut with anticipation, and even seasoned officers fidgeted. This was uncharted territory after all. The ship's landing thrusters hummed as we descended into the designated zone, a clearing amidst towering crimson trees whose branches intertwined like the skeletal fingers of giants. Our delegation stepped off the cruiser, greeted by an uncanny silence that sent a shiver down my spine. "Welcome to Vrandar Prime, human," spoke a deep, melodic voice. Emerging from the shadows was Kyra, the Vrandans' legendary warrior diplomat. And what a figure she cut. Towering above me, with skin like polished onyx and eyes that glowed a mesmerizing violet, she seemed more a deity than a diplomat. Her dark, silken hair cascaded down her back in intricate braids that swayed as she moved. Yet it was her form that drew attention, curves honed to lethal perfection, muscles that rippled beneath a glistening, scale-like exosuit. The others behind me exchanged glances, wide-eyed and awestruck. But I forced my gaze to remain steady, my jaw clenched as I saluted. Kyra's gaze met mine, challenging, as if daring me to acknowledge the unspoken truth that lay between us. Here on this alien world, we were the ones out of our depth. "Your journey was long, no?" she said, stepping closer, her voice like a warm knife cutting through ice. "Yes," I managed, my voice rougher than I intended. "But we're here to strengthen our alliance." A smile, sly and knowing, tugged at the corner of her full lips. "Alliance? Yes, we shall see how strong you are when tested." A low chuckle rippled through the ranks of Vrandans that had gathered, their own imposing forms clad in metallic fabrics that shimmered with each subtle shift. Each of them possessed a grace and raw strength that bordered on intimidating, and I could almost feel the smirk of our commander at the tension simmering between us and our hosts. "Ethan," muttered Dr. Morena, the cultural liaison beside me, "brace yourself. These people have their own way of measuring worth, and it's as much about physical might as it is about negotiation." Before I could respond, Kyra lifted her arm and gestured. "Follow me. Let us test your endurance, in our own way." Her eyes danced with what I could only describe as a challenge and a promise. The path she led us down wound deeper into the jungle, each step ushering us into an almost otherworldly realm. Bioluminescent plants lit up under our boots, casting a greenish glow that wrapped around us like an enchanted cocoon. The distant sounds of wildlife hummed in harmony, creating a backdrop of unending motion. We emerged into a clearing dominated by a grand arena hewn from dark stone, surrounded by an amphitheater where other Vrandans perched like silent sentinels. The air thrummed with an electric tension. Kyra turned, eyes locking with mine as she spoke. "Touch them, I dare you," she said, her voice both taunting and electric. A hush fell over the crowd. "Think you can handle these magnificent curves?" she added, motioning to the warriors who stood around her, statuesque and imposing, with a confidence that was unnerving. The meaning wasn't lost on anyone. This was no ordinary greeting. This was an invitation to engage in a test of strength and resolve. I swallowed hard, the anticipation coiling within me like a living thing. "Ethan," Commander Hale's voice came through once more, a hint of pride and warning interwoven. "Show them what humans are capable of." With that, I stepped forward, pulse quickening as Kyra's violet gaze burned into mine. This mission was about to become anything but routine. The moment my foot touched the arena floor, the crowd erupted into a cacophony of voices, a sound that resonated deep within my chest. The Vrandans were unlike any beings I had ever encountered, their raw intensity suffusing the space with an almost palpable energy. Kyra's eyes never wavered from mine, and a slight, almost imperceptible nod was all the signal I needed to brace myself. A warrior stepped forward, taller than me by at least half a meter, his frame coiled with muscle and clad in the same glistening scale-like exosuit. His name was Raltor, as I had learned from whispered conversations during the landing prep, one of Kyra's fiercest subordinates. He flexed his hands and the metallic fibers in his suit crackled like the static before a storm. "Do you have what it takes, human?" Raltor's voice rumbled like distant thunder. My heart pounded, but I stood my ground. "Let's find out." A hush fell over the arena as we squared off. The moment stretched, taut and trembling, until Raltor lunged. He was a blur of speed and strength, and I barely managed to sidestep, feeling the rush of displaced air sting my skin. He spun on his heel, using the momentum to drive his elbow toward my ribs. I ducked and retaliated with a sweep kick that landed solidly against his shin. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, an acknowledgement that I wasn't just another soft-skinned envoy. The crowd's murmur shifted, tinged now with curiosity. Raltor's eyes narrowed, and he grinned, a feral gleam that sent a shiver down my spine. He came at me again, faster this time, striking in a series of calculated blows designed to test my reflexes. Each hit I blocked sent shockwaves up my arms, numbing them, but I refused to falter. "Impressive," Kyra's voice cut through the din, her tone infused with the faintest trace of amusement. With a roar, Raltor switched tactics, feinting left before sweeping low. His leg caught mine and I hit the ground hard, the taste of copper flooding my mouth. Pain radiated up my back, but I rolled away before he could pin me. Adrenaline surged, sharpening my focus, and I sprang up, launching myself at him in a move that surprised even me. My fist connected with his jaw, a sharp crack that echoed in the silence. He stumbled, eyes wide, and for a heartbeat the arena stood still. The crowd erupted into cheers and gasps, a tide of sound that fed my determination. But it was far from over. Raltor regained his balance, and the look he gave me was one of grudging respect. He tilted his head, acknowledging the strike, and then stepped back into formation. "Enough," Kyra commanded, raising a hand. Raltor bowed and withdrew, his chest heaving as he cast me one last unreadable glance. Kyra approached, the subtle grace in her stride an embodiment of control and power. She stopped just close enough that I could see the barely perceptible pulse at her throat, the gleam of sweat that glistened on her collarbone. "You endure well," she said, her voice low, intimate, as if meant for my ears alone. But this was only the beginning. I took a deep breath, every muscle in my body screaming in protest. "I'm ready for whatever comes next." Her lips curved into a smile, but it held no comfort. Instead, it promised trials that would test more than just my physical prowess. Without another word, she turned and gestured for me to follow. The crowd parted like waves, their faces alight with a mix of anticipation and newfound respect. We walked past towering statues of stone figures, their features chiseled into fierce expressions that mirrored those around me. The path led to a towering hall, its entrance framed by symbols that glowed softly, glyphs that spoke of ancient rites and challenges faced by countless warriors before me. The air grew cooler as we stepped inside, the sounds of the crowd fading until only our footsteps remained. "Ethan," Dr. Morena whispered as she caught up beside me, her eyes darting nervously over the carved walls. "They're not just testing you, they're observing how we respond under pressure." I nodded, a bead of sweat trailing down my temple. I had known this was a show of strength, but now it was clear it was also a dance of diplomacy, every move scrutinized. Kyra stopped at the far end of the hall, turning slowly to face us. "Beyond this door lies a trial that has defined our greatest warriors," she said, eyes shifting from one member of our party to another. "Survive it and you may earn more than just our respect." The door creaked open, revealing an expanse bathed in shifting shadows. The sounds of the jungle seeped in, mingling with the whisper of something unseen yet powerful. "Enter," Kyra commanded, and the challenge in her eyes sent a spark of defiance surging through me. I stepped forward into the unknown. The corridor beyond the door was dimly lit, and the air had a charge that made the hair on my arms stand on end. Bioluminescent vines coiled along the walls, pulsing softly as if alive, guiding us deeper into the unknown. The silence was broken only by the rhythmic thud of our boots against the stone floor, each step a drumbeat in the symphony of suspense. Kyra's silhouette moved ahead, a vision of otherworldly grace and power. I could sense the eyes of my team darting around, their breaths shallow, the weight of our task pressing down on us like a vice. Dr. Morena's face was pale, lips pressed into a thin line as she studied the glowing glyphs etched into the walls. The symbols shifted subtly as though responding to our presence, weaving patterns that whispered secrets too ancient to comprehend. "Keep alert," I murmured, my voice steady despite the tension coiling in my gut. The path opened up into a cavernous chamber, and the temperature dropped, mist curling up from the floor in lazy tendrils. Kyra paused at the center, her eyes narrowing as she surveyed the room. The trial of rights, she declared, her voice resonating through the space. A test of strength, wit, and spirit. Only those who prove themselves worthy may claim the title of ally. From the shadows, a low growl rolled out like thunder. Shapes detached themselves from the gloom, emerging into the dim light. Creatures with sinewy limbs and eyes that glowed an eerie cyan prowled forward. Their exoskeletal bodies shimmered, and I recognized them from the mission briefings. Vorhunters, apex predators of Vrandar Prime. Defensive positions, Commander Hale barked, his voice cutting through the rising tension. My fingers tightened around my pulse rifle, the familiar hum of the charged core reassuring. No weapons, Kyra's command snapped through the air, freezing us mid-motion. She stepped closer, eyes blazing as she spoke, to earn our respect, you must rely on your strength alone. A cold pit formed in my stomach as I released my rifle, the weight of the challenge sinking in. The Vorhunters circled, their movements a blur of predatory elegance. One leaped forward, jaws snapping, and I rolled out of the way just in time, feeling the whoosh of air as it missed by a hair. Watch the flanks, I shouted, catching a glimpse of Morena ducking under a swipe, her eyes wide with terror. The creature's tail lashed out, splintering a stone column with ease. My instincts roared to life and I surged forward, grabbing a broken shard of rock. As the Vorhunter rounded on me, I thrust the jagged edge into its exposed underbelly. It screeched, a high-pitched wail that echoed off the chamber walls and fell back, convulsing. Impressive, Kyra's voice cut through the chaos, her expression unreadable. The rest of the creatures hesitated, their primal intelligence processing the sudden shift in power. A second Vorhunter lunged at Dr. Morena, its talons glinting in the low light. Without thinking, I leapt between them, grabbing the creature's forelimbs and using its momentum to flip it over my head. It crashed to the ground with a guttural snarl, and I pounced, driving my knee into its throat until it stilled. The chamber fell silent once more, save for our ragged breathing. The surviving Vorhunters retreated, fading back into the darkness with low, frustrated growls. Kyra's eyes swept over us, noting the bruises and sweat-soaked exhaustion that painted our faces. You fight as if your spirit knows no bounds, she said, stepping forward until she was close enough that I could see the subtle twitch of a muscle in her jaw. Perhaps there is hope for you after all. A slow clap echoed from the shadows and a figure emerged, a Vrandon male, taller even than Kyra, his presence suffused with authority. His armor was intricately adorned with iridescent scales, and his gaze held a sharp, calculating gleam. I am Vorik, he announced, the name alone carrying the weight of command. Leader of the War Council. You have passed the trial of rights, but this was merely a taste. The silence that followed was more oppressive than any battle. My muscles burned, but I stood taller, meeting Vorik's gaze with unwavering determination. What's next? I asked, my voice rough but resolute. Vorik's eyes narrowed, and a smile ghosted across his lips. The right of the mind. Let us see if your cunning matches your strength. The hall behind him glowed as new symbols lit up, shifting and morphing into a labyrinth of light. I swallowed, bracing myself for whatever came next. The true test had only just begun. The labyrinth stretched out before us, a maze of glowing glyphs and shifting light that played tricks on the eye. Each step felt like treading on whispers, as though the very floor sought to speak its secrets. The air crackled with an energy that was both alien and familiar, a hum that resonated with the deepest parts of the mind. Vorik's imposing form stood at the entrance, watching with a scrutiny that felt almost predatory. Enter and let your mind guide you, he intoned. Only those who grasp the essence of what is hidden will emerge unscathed. Kyra's gaze met mine, a flicker of warning in her violet eyes. I nodded once, signaling I understood. The right of the mind was more than just a test of intellect. It was a battle of will. I stepped into the labyrinth, the light shifting around me as the entrance sealed behind us. Dr. Morena's breath caught, the sound stark against the sudden silence. The path ahead branched into three, each corridor filled with an undulating pattern of light that seemed to pulse in response to our presence. Choose wisely, Morena whispered, her voice strained. These symbols, they're alive. I focused, scanning the glyphs with narrowed eyes. They seemed to shimmer with intent, each pattern subtly different. My fingers traced the edge of the nearest glyph, its glow intensifying as I made contact. A memory surfaced, a training exercise on deciphering alien languages. Follow the path of resonance, I said, the realization clicking into place. The symbol to the left vibrated ever so slightly, a thrumming sensation beneath my fingertips. This way, I commanded, stepping forward. The others followed, their hesitation palpable. The corridor narrowed, the walls closing in with symbols that twisted and reformed as we moved. They tested our focus, projecting false images, dangers that never materialized, figures of shadow that dissolved when approached. Morina gasped as a glyph beside her shifted, its light transforming into a thin, snake-like tendril that reached out. I grabbed her arm, pulling her forward before it could latch on. The corridor flared in response, a surge of bright white that blinded us momentarily. My pulse quickened, muscles tensing as I adjusted to the disorienting flash. Stay close, I muttered, the heat of the trial pressing in. The path opened into a circular chamber where the floor was covered in tessellating patterns of light. In the center stood a pedestal adorned with an orb, its surface shifting like liquid metal. The test of reflection, Kyra's voice echoed, though she was nowhere in sight. Only by facing what lies within can one find the way out. I approached the orb cautiously, sensing the intensity of its energy. The air seemed to thrum with my heartbeat as I extended a hand. The surface was cool, unnaturally so, and as my fingers brushed it, the room changed. A dozen reflections of myself stared back at me, each one subtly different. Some bore scars I didn't have, others held expressions of doubt or fury. One version of me, eyes burning with a fierce, unyielding light, stepped forward. "Do you understand what you face?" it asked, voice identical to mine but layered with something deeper, primal. "I do," I replied, forcing calm into my tone. "This is a test of control." The reflection smiled, but it was cold, challenging. "Prove it?" The figures lunged as one, a blur of motion and raw emotion. I fought back, blocking and countering strikes that seemed to come from every angle. Each blow I landed felt like hitting solid rock, each impact reverberating through my bones. The room shifted and twisted, the light warping in time with our movements. "Focus," Morina's voice called, sharp and urgent. The noise of the struggle threatened to drown her out, but I latched onto her words, pulling strength from them. This wasn't just about brute force, it was a battle of inner resolve. I closed my eyes, drawing a deep breath that steadied the chaos within. The movements around me slowed, the echoes of combat dulled as my heartbeat found a steady rhythm. When I opened my eyes, the reflections wavered, their solidity dissolving. "Acceptance," I whispered, the realization spreading like a flame. The room shifted again, the reflections merging into one true form, my own, unscarred and unyielding. The orb's glow dimmed, and the glyphs on the walls brightened, forming a path that led out of the chamber. I turned, finding the others watching, awe and relief mingled in their expressions. Kyra's voice echoed one last time, tinged with something close to respect. "You have passed the rite of the mind. But greater trials await." The way forward was clear, but the true challenge loomed ever closer. The path led us deeper into the heart of Randar Prime's ancient sanctum. The walls whispered with the weight of history, and the air was thick with a mix of ozone and the tang of anticipation. Ahead, Kyra stood motionless, her back to us as if listening to something only she could hear. Vorik was nowhere in sight, but his presence lingered like a storm waiting to break. "This is the final test," Kyra said without turning, her voice cutting through the silence. "The rite of unity. Alone you have proven your strength and mind. But now you must show us that your kind can stand as one." I exchanged a glance with Dr. Morina, whose eyes reflected both fear and resolve. Commander Hale stepped up beside me, his jaw set in that determined way that spoke of decades of hard-won battles. "What does it entail?" Hale asked, breaking the silence. Kyra turned, a small, inscrutable smile playing on her lips. "Survive together." Before we could question her further, the ground beneath us shuddered, and a circular platform rose, lifting us into a cavernous chamber lit by a sky of glowing veins crisscrossing the stone ceiling like a net of molten light. At the center stood 4 monoliths, each adorned with intricate carvings that pulsed in sync with the energy of the room. "Each of you must activate a monolith," Kyra explained, her voice echoing through the chamber. "Only by combining your strength and focus will the path forward reveal itself." Without hesitation, I approached the nearest monolith, placing my hands on its cool, stone surface. The carvings flared beneath my touch, sending a jolt of energy racing up my arms. To my right, Dr. Morina took her place at the second monolith, her expression wavering between determination and awe. Hale and Private Anders moved to the remaining 2. "Ready?" I called out, meeting each of their gazes. "Begin," Kyra's command resonated through the chamber. The instant we focused, the room erupted in a symphony of shifting light and sound. The veins above surged, and from the shadows, figures began to materialize. Phantoms of warriors passed, their spectral forms wielding weapons of pure energy. They moved as one, their eyes fixed on us, and I realized this was no illusion. "Hold steady." Hale barked, but his voice cracked under the strain of concentration. One of the spectral figures lunged at me, and the pulse of energy at my fingertips flared in response. I pushed back, feeling the resistance like a physical force. The ghost reeled, but more took its place, their movements synchronized, relentless. "We need to align," Morena shouted, eyes wide as she fought off her own assailants. Our focus, together. The truth hit me like a wave. The monoliths weren't just measuring individual resolve. They demanded unity. I closed my eyes, shutting out the chaos, and extended my awareness to the others. "Trust," I whispered, more to myself than to them. "We move as one." The energy shifted, as if responding to an unspoken call. The monolith's light connected, threading between us in lines of radiant power. The ghosts faltered, their forms flickering, uncertain. Hale's eyes met mine, a rare smile breaking through his rigid focus. "Together," he said. We channeled the energy, our separate pulses blending into a singular, powerful force. The room trembled, and the monoliths flared bright enough to blind. The spectral warriors dissolved, their weapons shattering into harmless sparks that rained down like stardust. A low rumble vibrated through the chamber, and the monoliths sank into the floor, revealing a set of towering doors inscribed with the oldest glyphs we'd seen yet. They parted with a groan, unveiling a vista that stole the breath from my lungs. Beyond was a vast expanse, where structures of gleaming metal and crystal reached up toward a sky crackling with ribbons of energy. It was a city, an alien civilization's heart, waiting and watching. Kyra stepped forward, her eyes soft with a respect that hadn't been there before. "You have proven more than strength or mind," she said, her voice reverberating in the hollow space. "You have shown unity, and that is what we value most." I exhaled, the weight of the trial seeping out of me. The city ahead shimmered, alive and inviting, and for the first time, I felt not just like an interloper but like someone who might, just maybe, belong. Vorik's form emerged from the shadows, his gaze approving. "You have passed the rite of unity. Welcome, humans, to the heart of Vrandar." The path forward was ours, and beyond it, an alliance unlike any we had ever known.